everybody. Welcome to our Gig'em 247 AggieSports.com pre-draft show. Obviously, we're recording this, put it on the internet later on, so obviously, hopefully, we'll get a few more people seeing that. So, should be good. Kind of quick introduce everybody up here. I'm Aubrey Bloom. I'm the team publisher, I guess is my title on the site. To my left is David Harris of the Eagle. To the left of him is Taylor Hamm, who's our recruiting guy. And then the far left is Coach Mcmillian, who was the defensive backs coach last year at Texas A&M. So we brought him on to give a lot of questions, a lot of answers for us about certain things, recruiting, personnel, otherwise. So we're going to kind of go through quite a few things throughout the show. So we're going to go ahead and get started and see how this goes. All right, we're going to start off kind of a little excitement talking about spring practice. Obviously, the Blue and White game coming up on Saturday. So, you know, practice a little bit different this year. It's been closed to the public and to the media. Under Coach Sherman, we could go in there and watch the whole thing. This year, you got the first, 15 minutes, and then they kick us out. So the only thing we've really seen all of is the scrimmages. So Harris has been with me all through spring practice, out there every day. You've seen both the scrimmages. Taylor, you have as well. So just kind of the first question, you know, who's been the most improved player to you? A guy that, you know, maybe you weren't expecting much out of this year that's really kind of surprised you with how he's playing?
Well, Gaston Damascus definitely during the stretching has stood out. He looks very flexible. But in all seriousness, I'm going to have to go with Steven Jenkins on that one, who is probably the best defensive player at Friday night scrimmage. He really looks like he's a little more confident in what he's doing out there, and he's not thinking. He's making plays.
Yeah, on Friday night, I would say it's between Jenkins and Spencer Neely as far as just being disruptive, being in the backfield consistently and stuff like that. Taylor, how about you? You know, the guy that's kind of stood out.
I'm going to go with DeShazer Everett. He's the guy who had to step up in the absence of the seniors graduating at cornerback. He's a young, talented guy. Really just, his issue was getting in, getting experience, and wanting to compete with his other teammates. I know he's really close with Floyd Raven, and I know when I get to Chuck Mcmillian here, he's going to back me up and say that really what DeShazer needed to do and what he's doing now is coming out with the mentality that he is one of the best defensive backs on the team. And Coach, I just wanted to get your take on DeShazer. Does that surprise you as a pick?
Doesn't surprise me at all when you talk about DeShazer. When he came in as a freshman, you know, he had it. It's just one of those things, the player has what we call it. But the key thing about him right now is being able to step up, being able to start the role, and then putting Floyd Raven behind him. You know, and actually since they worked together, since Dustin's been out, I think that's been good because Floyd was the main guy that overshadowed DeShazer. But DeShazer is great guy.
Kind of just, if you don't mind, coaches, take us through the recruiting process of DeShazer and why he was the guy you felt like could help you guys win some ball games.
Well, when Coach Turner brought the video in, DeShazer played running back, he played strong safety, and and you look at a guy like that that's very physical, that can run, even though he wasn't playing as far as corner role, but you can see the talent that he possessed. And when you get him in there and you talk to him as a player, the key thing is he is actually a very brilliant, smart kid, so football comes natural to him, whereas Floyd, and I'll mention Floyd, it's not a natural thing for Floyd. Floyd is learning to become a football player, whereas DeShazer is already that.
Yeah, that kind of brings us kind of a second point, which was a surprises in the spring, and I think really the secondary overall has been one because there are injuries coming in. Obviously, Dustin Harris has been injured for part of the spring. Stephen Campbell hasn't practiced at all this spring. And those guys have still looked, hit or miss, but they look good at times, especially as you mentioned DeShazer. And I was kind of wondering, kind of if you saw coming in, what are the big differences between a guy like DeShazer Everett and a guy like Dustin Harris? Like when you're watching them play, what are kind of the strengths of those guys?
DeShazer is more of a defensive player. Dustin Harris is an offensive player that we try to make a defensive player. Dustin does well with the ball in this match. Okay, DeShazer does well trying to take the ball away. And that's the difference between both of them. Dustin's been here for 4 years. He started as a true freshman. But the mentality as a corner, you got to have confidence. You got to have that determination that you're the best on the field. And Dustin's really never had that. And if he ever gets that, he's the most talented player in the secondary. But just the heart that he has to grow.
And I think going along with the secondary, the safeties this spring have been interesting. Howard Matthews is a guy who everyone knew coming out as an ultra-talented guy. Another guy who played with the ball in his hands a lot in high school, a lot of different positions. And kind of, what's the deal with Matthews as far as where is he and where could he be?
If Howard Matthews decides to play, which he didn't last year because he did not want to play as a true freshman. If he decides to play, he can be great. You know, and the key thing is he has to understand how to play full speed. And from what I hear, you know, he is doing that right now, which is great because he can be a dominant force by going into the SEC as far as being that type of safety that you need. Stephen Campbell, you had mentioned earlier, has not practiced this spring, has not practiced this fall since he's been here. So to count on him being ready for next year, you know, that's a big wish.
Coach, you know, sticking at the safety position, I know last year you guys brought in Jontel Franklin, a guy that you wanted to bring in to really push Trent Hunter and possibly take his spot. I know you feel like he's a guy that still needs to learn the game of football better, but is there a chance that Jontel can come in and contribute next year for this team?
I'll tell you this about Jontel. You know, we knew Trent, you know, and I love Trent truly. Trent wasn't the answer for us, and we tried to bring in a guy last year to beat him out, you know, but the guy that came in, you know, he could pass the calculus 10 test, you know, great academics student, but couldn't make the check on the field, and, you know, in that case, he is not a very smart football player. Now, if he becomes a better football player on the field as far as understanding what's going on, he can contribute because he does have the talent. It's just the fact that the knowledge of the game for him, you know, is it's not there, just like Floyd Raven.
And I think I got to go to Harris. One thing I want to kind of flip a little bit is talk a little bit about offensive players we've seen this spring. A lot of the surprises have been on the defensive side, mainly because there's a lot of available spots on the defensive side. But offensively, what guys have really stuck out to you? I think the big one is obviously Mike Evans. And let's kind of talk about, you know, what he's been able to do and what you've seen from him this spring.
That's been surprising, and coupled with the fact that Nate Askew really hasn't stepped up, and it seemed like he had a chance to do that this spring. It just seems like Evans has overshadowed him. When, I mean, going into camp, you probably thought that Askew was someone who was going to contribute going into the season, but right now he's not doing that.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, we have guys in the interview room, like we had Ryan Swope the other day, we had Kinder McNeil yesterday, who talk about, when you ask them, you know, who are the guys that have stepped up, and they mentioned Mike Evans. You know, a guy like Kinder McNeil is a senior slot guy who figures to be a big-time, you know, a player in the rotation next year. He goes out of his way to mention that Mike Evans has not only improved as a player, but improved in the locker room. You know, a guy who wants to get it done, a guy who's out there working hard, and I think that's maybe been the most surprising player on the offensive side. For sure. I mean, is there anyone else that kind of stands out?
No, I kind of just want to add to that. I think what the coaches are looking for is consistency. I mean, Nate Askew in the first scrimmage goes out there and really was probably hands down the best receiver out there between him and Kendrick Williams. But, you know, Coach Sumlin had talked about pretenders, those guys that come to work one day and then just disappear when the pads come on. And not to say that Nate is to that point yet, but what Nate has to do is really stack practices. I know that was a motto what Coach Sherman had was coming out and stacking practices and continuing to get better every day. So Nate Askew, I think, has it. I really like Mike Evans and what he's done. It's just interesting to see what they're going to do at the wide receiver spot because this system, the receivers that you have on campus right now, I don't know if they ideally fit what Coach Sumlin ultimately wants to do with this offense.
Yeah, let's talk about, you know, we talk about surprises. I think another at the receiver position has been McKendrick Williams at times. And he's a classic guy. Some days he's brilliant. As you mentioned in the first scrimmage, he looked like, you know, Chris Randy from Florida out there doing all kinds of stuff. Catching the ball in the seam, running the middle of the field, he's wide open out in space. And then the second scrimmage, he's like a ghost. You might as well not have even been out there. So I think he's a guy that, you know, you look to see more from. And, you know, you mentioned guys that kind of fit in this offense, and that's one that they pointed to, McKendrick Williams. But I don't know if you had something that kind of added out on McKendrick.
The one thing about McKendrick is he is a football player, and I think he fits well in Sumlin's offense. And you had mentioned the first scrimmage, you know, he looked like, you know, an All-American player in the second scrimmage, you know, which I wasn't a part of. But when you look at it, sometimes when you look at an offensive coach, they tend to go for a different start work, something different. As you, from what I heard, running back that transferred in here, Brandon Williams was just running the ball, so basically working on a running game when you look at it in that case. So therefore, he may have disappeared because of the fact that the offense started doing something totally different.
Yeah, that's a good thing. There's a lot of guys that did step up on the screen in the second scrimmage that we didn't necessarily see in the first scrimmage. Let's talk about running backs. I mean, we're on the offense. You know, some other guys that have been kind of surprising this spring. You know, the running back position has been nailed with injuries this spring. At one point the other day, they were down to, I think, just Will Randolph in a practice. And just Mcmillian is like, Randolph is still hurt. Michael's not taking hits in practice, and Brandon Williams got hurt in scrimmage. So So, looking at that kind of just went up and down. What have you seen from that? What guys have kind of stood out? Obviously, Brandon Williams has been huge. And just, kind of what have you seen of it?
Brandon Williams, someone said today that he sees him playing in the scrimmage on Saturday, but I haven't seen enough from Ben Molina right now to say that this is a very deep position. I mean, obviously Trey Williams is coming in, but if Brandon Williams isn't eligible, which is likely at this point, you'd like to see more from Molina so that there's 3 backs that can carry the ball.
Yeah, and that's kind of some of the surprising stuff. Let's get to the headliner of spring football, which has been the battle, so-called battle, maybe not a battle, but quarterback, and kind of get y'all's thoughts there on what you're seeing. And just from what we know is that what we've seen is Jamil Showers has been the best quarterback. But we haven't seen an awful lot. And someone hits that all the time and talks about, with Kingsbury kind of talking about that. We don't see practice every day, and we don't know what's going on. But what we have seen is 2 guys really emerge. I want to get your take on both Jamil Showers and Justin.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's real surprising that Jamil has stepped up in this role. I mean, he's a guy who really took it upon himself to learn from Ryan Tannehill throughout the process, even his redshirt year, learning with JJ and just being a part of team meetings, and of course every guy's got to step up and go through that maturity phase. But I mean, his arm strength is there. He fits what Coach Sumlin's looking for. I think with Johnny Manziel, I think he gets into that Kerrville type mode again. Do we have a mode at Kerrville? Yeah, just getting outside of the pocket and trying to maybe force balls into coverage where you should making better decisions when I'm making. I think Coach, he's coaching against those guys and seeing their abilities. I'd like to get his take on the quarterback situation.
Yeah, I wanted to ask specifically. We see Manziel's athleticism, people know about it, but a lot of people know about Jamil Showers' athleticism. What kind of an athlete is he compared to the other guys' athleticism?
Jamil will probably can play on the offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball. He can probably play receiver, he probably can play DB. He does have that talent, he does possess that talent. One thing about Jamil is what we've always, from the previous staff, is the accuracy as far as throwing the football, which becomes better when you're working with Kingsbury, I believe, as far as his practice. But when you look at Johnny Manziel, when you mention he still has that Kerrville Tybee, I want to make a play and throws interceptions. That's what he did as a true freshman. Even though he's going to be a redshirt freshman now. A guy, I think that's, in my opinion, what you're missing out on is the Matt Joker kid. The Matt Joker comes from a style of offense just like this out of Arlington High School. I don't know what he's doing and whatnot, but as far as throwing the ball, working with Kingsbury, this and that, I think this offense fits him. I mean, I'm not going to compare him to Case Keenum or anybody like that, but I think this style of offense is for Joker.
Yeah, and I think the issue with Jokel that we've seen, and even again with limited reps we saw in the first scrimmage, is he just holds on to the ball too much. And that's always been the case, and it's one of those things, to me, sort of like Nate Askew, where you're like, when he figures it out, he's going to be great. But you just keep waiting, and maybe it's going to come on, and maybe we will. Again, we're behind closed doors, we don't really know what's going on back there. But again, is there anything that you think, as far as Saturday and the blue and white game, that could surprise you as a quarterback? I mean, going in, are you looking for anything in particular? Quarterback standpoint,
you want to see consistent play. You want to see those guys getting better from the last scrimmage. I think it's as simple as that. I know it's a little bit of coach speak, maybe a little bit, but when you look at guys, and especially in that position, are they getting better? The facets of the offense that you need them to get better. Because you're not going to be able to work with them. Are you getting ingrained in their head that they have to get better in 7-on-7s and get organized this summer? I mean, those are all things that go on this last week and going into Saturday and getting those guys prepared for fall camp.
I think in any competition, you just want to see a guy just take it. I mean, Jamil Showers, to me, right now, is obviously the front runner of his position. I'd like to see him just put together, a scrimmage. It's like you said, for the first 10, 15 plays here today, he was lights out. But after that, he kind of dwindled. And I'd like to see him just put that all together and just take the job.
Yeah, and I think one thing that people kind of forget when they're watching the scrimmages is that one of those quarterbacks is playing behind the first team offensive line, which has maybe 3 or 4 future NFL players. The other one is playing behind the second offensive line, which I think has a walk-on and 2 freshmen. So, especially the second scrimmage, people talk about how great Showers started and how horrible Manziel started. Part of the problem with Manziel at the second offensive line, when they flipped later in the scrimmage, all of a sudden Manziel scored touchdowns and Showers was going there. So I think that's a big key that people kind of forget when they're watching these spring games.
Well, believe it or not, Mcmillian loved recruiting offensive linemen when he was a coach. He loved it. I mean, it's funny because Coach Turner would bring him DBs and he would bring Coach Turner offensive line. So I would really be interested to hear your take on the offensive line. We know about Jokel, we know about Matthews. Maybe briefly talk about those two, and maybe some of the other just key role players on that line.
Well, when you look at the offensive line, even though Jarvis hasn't been out of practice, you're missing out on Cedric. That offensive line is an NFL type of offensive line. I think you got about 5 or 6 guys that potentially will have a chance to play in the NFL at some point. One thing about offensive linemen there is like DBs, everything requires fundamental techniques that you got to work on daily. You just can't go out there and just play. All right, and one thing that Coach Turner did well with him, even though it's like a military boot camp sometimes, he did work on fundamentals and techniques, which has helped these kids, which is going to now help the offense, because now when you come in, these guys got that playing experience. They've been coached by Coach Sherman, they've been coached by, Coach Turner, which now whoever the offensive line coach is, I don't know the guy's name, B.J. Anderson, it makes his job easier. So, whereas Yates replacing me, his job is going to be hard.
Yeah, one thing I was kind of wondering about is on the offensive line is really how good are these guys, and does this system utilize that ability? Does it playing the spread offense, does that enhance your offensive line, or does that maybe take away from a big advantage that your offensive line would be?
I believe it takes away as far as ability as far as running football. I mean, you have mentioned, we got basically 3 running backs that'll be here. You got Trey Williams that'll be here, and you got Christian Michael become healthy. Ben Molina, who showed last year when Michael went out and Cyrus got hurt that he is, he's not going to break 1 for 100. He may break 1 for 50, but they are a type of offensive line that their running style, basically offensive line, but they can pass protect. I just believe, these guys are going to be great. I think B.J. Anderson, now what's going to happen now, they understand the run game. Now they're going to understand the pass game. Now this is just going to make them even better for competition.
Something I'd be interested to get your take on, I think the fans would be interested too, is just the environment of practice. Everyone talks about the music and just the way they practice. I know Coach Sherman at times, it was a little difficult, be playing a game on Saturday, you're back 6 a.m. on Monday, kids got to go to class and then kind of come back for another practice that afternoon. What do you think about that, just the different style, the atmosphere Coach Solomon's presented his players and his staff, and does it, produce a better environment for learning?
Well, kids learn different ways. I know some of them got the music out there, and it's really just to be loose. And you had mentioned, our practices, for the most part, not that they were not having fun, but it had become one of those things where when you having 2-a-days, throughout, the season, and then that hurt us sometimes in recruiting, and I can tell you for a fact, because I talked to the guys at TCU, that's something they use against us. You're having 2-a-days throughout the fall. But when you play on a Saturday, you come back on a Monday, it's never been 48 hours or whatever it may be, and you come back and after practice, full go. I mean, you haven't rested. And so sometimes that will have an effect on how we look. So I'll leave that short.
I just know you guys quit doing that after the Kansas game. Y'all spread out 6 wins.
Well, when you look at the 9-3 season, when we went 3-3, and I know we'll be talking about Tannehill shortly. He did make a difference. But when we did go 3-3 2 years ago, we stopped at 6 a.m. in the morning practices with 6 straight games. This year we just stopped the practices until the end. And sometimes you got to let college be college, let high school be high school, and let the NFL be the NFL, in my opinion. And it's nothing negative. Whoever running the ship, that's what you do. But the key thing is, sometimes players, even if you talk to the players, they would probably be honest with you and catch them out on the outside. Sometimes it was grudges. They were tight.
Yeah, we got about 5 minutes to kind of round out the spring football talk. So one thing we talked about the secondary of the offense, but let's look at a little bit more on the defensive side, especially over the linebackers. Because this is a position group that, on the recruiting front, hasn't gone particularly well. You know, A&M's bodies at the linebacker position. But the core they have, the starting three group, you know, Stephen Jenkins, you know, Jonathan Stewart, and Sean Porter are a pretty good group. I'd like to get your take on how they've done this spring and kind of what you see from them, you know, this one.
Like I said, Jenkins to me has been the most impressive player on the defense, probably. And the question, of course, is depth. I mean, can Diamondback step up and be a fourth linebacker? But I think you know what we're going to get from Jonathan Stewart and Sean Porter at this point. I mean, Stewart has kind of turned into a consistent inside linebacker, and I think Sean Porter is probably the best player on the defense. So I think it's just a matter of finding depth.
And this is kind of a question for whoever really wants to take it, but when you're talking about the offensive line, whether or not this system utilizes those guys, I'd like to get your take on whether or not the 4-3 defense utilizes the talents of Sean Porter, or is he a guy who's going to be a little bit, not necessarily lost, but not necessarily being utilized the best as he could?
Yeah, he would be fine in the 4-3. I mean, because basically he's playing the same position for the most part. I mean, the one thing that's not being utilized is something that Coach Williams was here. He would tell you this: by being in the 3-man front, we didn't have enough depth in our 3-man front. So you're going to a 4-man front. So where are you going to find a depth now? I mean, I think that's where it's going to be kind of difficult to find, like you had mentioned, the depth as far as within the system.
Yeah, and they're trying to use guys like Demontre Moore, Brandon Alexander at the end. How do you think those guys fit in? You know, can those guys play defensive end in the SEC, or is it going to take a while for them to adjust?
Well, I think Demontre Moore, I think Brandon Williams, that's what they played in high school. You know, and as far as our position, our choke position, that was a glorified defensive end standing up. That when we did go into our 4-man stuff with the Rooters defense, up to 3-4, they just would never get head up on the tight end. They played what we call a 9 technique, which is not stop the tight end always. You know, the tight end blocked out. You know, they took the C gap. So basically, you know, going into the SEC, playing a 6 technique, you know, to where you may require a little bit of double team between the tackle and the tight end in that case. Because, you know, going to the SEC, you're going to see more two-back stuff for the most part. Can they play there? If they get stronger, and I think that's where Larry Jackson, you know, who I've known from several other Aggies, will get them stronger, and that's going to be the key. If they can get stronger, they can be able to play.
All right, well, that's going to kind of bring to the end of the first part of this, the spring football talk. We're going to come back probably about 3-4 minutes and start talking about a little bit of recruiting and into tonight's NFL draft. So kind of bear with us. We're going to take a little bit of a break. Thanks, guys.